Way to save the season to throw. Fire and down! Incomplete down at the goal line by San Diego! Tomlinson off the left side. Tomlinson sidestep. Hello, history books. I think they have to now. Here's Sproles. Sproles inside the 10, inside the 5, and the Chargers win the game.
What's up, good people? Welcome to TLR Roundtable. Craig's here with me. Jamie, not so much. He can't join us today, but like I wasn't here last week, we're going to pick it up here for Jamie, and it'll be Craig and I to fill in for your roundtable questions. First one on, Kay, what's up? Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us live here. And make sure before we get off here, you're subscribed on YouTube and the podcast so you can catch us whenever we go live and listen to the audio when you want to go back and listen to it. So we're going to do Twitter questions. We're going to do our Discord questions. We're going to go through some bad tweets. I know Casey already wants to know about JC Jackson, which we will do in a little bit. Or you just want to kick it off now? You just want to get it off the top?
Yo, I mean, it's the hot topic. It's what everyone wants to talk about.
You know what? Okay, hold on. We're going to wait a little bit because we got a JC Jackson question coming up, and that'll lead us into it. So we will do that, and Cal, no problem. We appreciate you. You're very welcome for this podcast. We appreciate you guys listening. All right, so we will get into JC Jackson. I'm not being a tease here. We just got a bunch of questions, and we will easily segue into that question, Casey. So, Craig, I'm going to go ahead and throw it to you first. As soon as I pull this thing up here, it is going to be our first Twitter question, and it comes from Shannon Sorensen. Is it going to become a problem having Will Clapp at center? I didn't see much push up the middle this last week, but it was the Raiders. Craig, how you feeling about Will Clapp as the center until if and when Corey Linsley gets better?
And therein kind of is the key if Corey Linsley actually comes back. But Clapp did a pretty decent job against the Raiders. I don't think he allowed a sack. I'm not sure how many pressures. I think maybe there was like one. So he can be serviceable. But what I did notice was that the Raiders were still able to get a significant amount of pressure on Herbert, I think on over 40% of his dropbacks, which is not ideal. Although a lot of that didn't come from Clapp, what I do think, or what the area I think is affected, are the protection calls, because Linsley handled pretty much all of that. Now, I'm not sure how much of that Clapp will account for, or if it's going to be shared between both he and Herbert. But if Herbert does now have to focus on those calls as well, then it's an extra bit on his shoulders. And I kind of sort of wonder if the pressure being what it was, even though it wasn't necessarily because of Clapp and his performance, has something to do with those protection calls not necessarily being on point the way they would be if Linsley was still around. So I could see it potentially being an issue against the Cowboys because their front is pretty stout. So last week, again, he performed well individually as a whole, collectively as a group, not so much, but I do think his ability to be on top of those calls is going to help a lot. But we won't really know until we see them against some more stiffer competition, how he fares. But as far as what I think, honestly, I know it's a non-answer. I really don't know at this point. I can't give you a fair answer. I want to believe in it, but I just don't have enough evidence.
Yeah, so I was pretty excited to watch Will Clapp on the rewatch because I saw, not that I take any stock into this, but PFF gave Will Clapp a good grade. And so it at least like piques your interest. And I was curious to rewatch it. And while he wasn't terrible, he wasn't great, there was a lot of interior pressure. And like the tail end of this question, but it was the Raiders. that's kind of the biggest sticking point for me, because outside of Max Crosby, this Raiders defense sucks, and they have for 3 weeks leading up to that game, and they got far too much interior pressure in my mind on Justin Herbert. And I think that has a lot to do with not having Corey Linsley out. We saw the difference between when Corey Linsley was on the field last year to when he wasn't. And he seems to be the guy that helps this line click. And I know, a lot of different things get thrown around about centers and being a field general and all that, but Corey Linsley really does fit that mold. He is the captain of that offensive line. And when you don't have that man up front making those calls and checks and everything up front, it changes everything. And so while the Raiders did get some interior pressure, I am concerned about Dallas coming up after the bye. I'm really concerned about Chris Jones in Kansas City at the game after that. That's going to be where it's really going to be telling. First off, I just hope as a person, that whole heart condition, I hope everything works out for him. And I don't know, if football even matters at this point. But it seems like he's with the team and they're going to try to work back into football. I don't know. It really, that status is up in the air. And first and foremost, I hope he gets better. But if it isn't as serious as we all hope it isn't, I hope Linsley gets back on the field soon, because we'll clap for a full while he was fine for a game against a pretty bad interior defensive line. It's going to get really hard coming up soon. And if they want to make some noise in the playoffs, it's going to be tough if Will Clapp is your center going into a playoff game. So I hope Linsley gets back soon. Will Clapp is not a problem yet, but we're gonna see just how bad and or good he'll be coming up in the next couple weeks. All right, number 2 is from Junius Slim. Based on the last couple games, do you feel comfortable with K9 Kenneth Murray wearing the green dot moving forward, or do you think Eric Kendricks needs to take that role back? I'm okay with Kenneth Murray having the green dot right now. And that's only because Eric Kendricks, this is his 9th season now. He's a veteran. Having the green dot doesn't, in my mind, hurt or help a guy like Eric Kendricks, because once that play comes in, he's the one who is directing traffic. He's making the calls. He knows what's going on. He doesn't have to be the guy to relay that info coming out of the huddle. So for me, it seems like, and it's a small sample size, but the green dot has helped Murray improve his play. Whether those two things correlate about having the green dot and his play improving, I don't know if that does correlate. If that's hard to say, but for now, it feels like it's helping his confidence. So I'm fine with Kenneth Murray keeping the green dot. It hasn't really hurt the team, but also this defense is still pretty bad as a unit. So while it hasn't helped the defense as a whole, it's helped Kenneth Murray individually in a strange way. So I'm okay with it. I would let him until it absolutely, is a detriment to the defense. Are you okay with him having the green dot?
Yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, he technically should have the green dot because he has more experience in defense. Mm-hmm. So it kind of sort of makes sense in that way. Yeah. If you're a better player, then it kind of feels like that's an automatic transition. But I agree with you, and it's also something that I mentioned before. I think maybe having the capability to call the plays and having that green dot in some way, shape, or form is helping him with his focus. He feels a greater level of responsibility, and maybe that's translating over to the field. Since that's happened, his performance has been actually, pretty good. Above average for certain, and that's leaps and bounds more than what he was doing before prior. So I'm perfectly fine with it. I don't think it's something that necessarily has to transition back over to Kendricks just because he's the veteran more so than K9 is. And again, as long as he's performing to this level with that change, why, I guess try to fix something that isn't broken. Yeah, just stick with it. It's perfectly fine. In the event that his play tapers off, I mean, I don't even know if removing that from him and moving it back to Kendricks makes that much of a difference. Maybe it does. I don't know. This could be a whole placebo effect thing. Just taking a wild shot in the dark here, but I'm perfectly fine again with him maintaining the green dot and making those calls. It seems to be doing something for his play one way or the other. But as long as it keeps improving, or if it just stays at the level it's at now, that's perfectly fine. He's playing just fine.
Yeah. All right. Whoa. What happened there? That was weird. Okay. Let's move on to the third one here. Third Twitter question, then we'll go on to Discord. This is from Cilantro Jones. Staley has mentioned the first few weeks of the season are a feeling out period. Bad teams can have a hot start. Good teams can underperform. So what are the Chargers? Is this a team that's good and inconsistent? Or are they bad and just getting lucky? I can't tell. Good question.
Doesn't it feel like you can ask this every year?
Every year, every week. Yeah.
It's on repeat, man. Yeah, you can go with the whole theory of teams are still trying to figure it out within the first few weeks. That's great. We're going to find out very soon, because when you get in that second quarter of the season and rolling into the type of competition that they're going to face here, going against Dallas, it'll tell you a lot in a hurry. As far as my personal opinion, it's pretty much what it's been for the last few years. A pretty top heavy team in certain areas that's extremely talented in those areas, depending on what positions you're talking about, that is also extremely inconsistent. And look at just this past game, it's the tale of two halves. Even though the offense wasn't on fire the entire game, they still put up 24 points in the first half of that game, and they come back out in the second half, and then goose egg. It's a stinker. So with this team, you never really can tell until you get about to the midway point of the season. Then you have a very good indication of who they're going to be, because at that point, they've essentially made whatever adjustments they're going to make, and they are who they are at that point. If we're basing this off of years past, and we're just looking at it on each side of the ball, well, say all three phases. The special teams has mostly been good, except for these last few weeks. There have been some iffy things, some muff punts, some bad punts in general. Coverage has been fine. But the defense, if adjustments are made there and they're playing better as the season goes on, then I feel a little bit more confident about who the team is in general, maybe through the next couple of games. The offense, you can say what you want about it, still one of the best in the NFL, and it's literally the first 4 games that we've seen it with this scheme, and they're performing pretty well collectively all together, I guess, throughout 4 games. But what this team is right now is what it always is: talented and inconsistent. And give it another few weeks, and I can probably tell you who I think they'll be for the remainder of the year. But right now, I need another couple games just to be certain, because I'm trying to hold out hope that it's not the same old team. But I feel like it probably is.
Yeah. So that whole, thing that Staley mentioned about the first few weeks of the season kind of being a feeling out period, that is like league wide. I've heard that from GMs to coaches to owners. It's like, it takes about 4 weeks to kind of discover what kind of team you are, and for the players to kind of acclimate to the physicality of the game, because they've been off for a while and they have to return to form. And it takes about 4 weeks. Your system gets solidified, team identities get secured. It's just, with teams like the Giants and Bears, it doesn't take 4 weeks to figure out you're not very good. They just end up not being good. But for most teams, you really find out like what kind of team you are in 4 weeks. You can prep and training camp, you can have preseason games, but you don't get your 53 on the field, your starters together, and really figure out what kind of team you are and what you're made of until after 4 games or so. And that I have always believed in, and I don't think Staley's making that up. And I actually agree. That's kind of what I feel like it takes for an NFL team to kind of get going and to figure out what you are. So,
well, where that really stands true is when you have a decent amount of turnover on any side of the ball, because you still have to build up that synergy. So if you're marching back pretty much the same guys, and every team for the most part goes through some tweaks and changes, some guys leave, new guys come in due to contract situations, cap, whatever. But if the scheme is largely the same and you have many of the same players, then you can probably start clicking a bit earlier. But if there's a significant amount of turnover and you're talking about a new scheme, you might get into it in 4 games. It may take a little bit longer. So yeah, there's a reality to that. I don't think it's an excuse whatsoever. I just think it applies especially to those teams that have new players and new schemes.
Yeah, I mean, look at how quick it took Miami and Buffalo and Kansas City to just turn it around. Lost the game early, we're able to flip the script because same system, pretty much all the same players. Chargers, whole new offensive coordinator, whole new system. It's going to take them a little bit longer, but so yeah, I think it's going to a lot can change in 17 games, and you'd hope they could have held on versus Miami and Tennessee, but it's still early, and it's definitely going to take a couple more games to really figure out if it is they're good and inconsistent or if they're just bad and getting lucky at times. It's a fair question, and it's not a cop out. There's just we need a bigger sample size, and I don't know that we can give you an answer right now on that. All right, so Craig, I know people are asking for it, so let's go ahead and go with let's give it to him. Let me let me find a question here. Here's our Discord question that we can segue into this. Go ahead, Craig.
All righty. What everyone wants to talk about. So this is from Navigation. Cool name. How much fault does the coaching staff get when it comes to the JC Jackson experiment, and how much to JC himself? What you got there, Garrett?
All right. How about so we on the Discord, Lightning Round Discord, we got some context. I'll give a little context. Not what we got. So we got a bunch of new context today. If you guys want to join the Discord, you can get that. But I'll give you the overall context, and then we can kind of get into Craig, who we think is at fault, and it was Casey who wanted to know our thoughts on this situation, and then Carlos who wanted to know who contacted about JC Jackson first. Was it the Chargers? Was it the Patriots? I can tell you it was the Patriots who reached out and got that deal done. But Telesco was on the phone earlier than that. But once Christian Gonzalez went out, it kind of helped kind of speed up that process. So basically, just some context in this whole saga. So JC Jackson felt like Brandon Staley didn't know how to use him very early on when he signed in LA. Last season, he felt like it was a learning period, and then there was a surgery, and then ultimately there was an injury. So it was kind of a lost season last year. He worked his butt off. We all know that. We saw all the clips from not only his Instagram, but the Chargers pushing it. He worked his ass off to get ready for week one. He got back week one. JC didn't feel like he was 100%, but he was still getting back into action. And then they benched him halfway through week two. JC Jackson felt like they kind of gave up on him. He worked so hard to get back into shape, getting back into NFL mode, and then one bad game in Miami, and then they're benching him halfway through game two. So he felt like he kind of felt spurred in this whole thing. It took one bad game versus Miami after not playing football for almost a year to ultimately bench him, which he felt was unfair. When they made JC Jackson inactive in week 3, he then, you saw, went to the media and started speaking through the media because Brandon Staley kept telling him he wasn't going to play, and JC didn't really feel like he was getting a good explanation why. They just weren't playing him at all. So once JC went to the media, Tom Telesco started to make some calls, started to put feelers out like, hey, this isn't a good situation for us. I think we're going to trade him. So they were planning on to really push to trade him around the trade deadline, or at least cutting him. And then Christian Gonzalez gets hurt. New England calls Tom Telesco, who had already put kind of the feelers out there. So once Gonzalez was out for the year, it motivated both sides. They got a deal done. So they made the deal now. The Chargers felt like it was going to get more ugly the longer it kind of extended. Originally, it was going to be a deadline deal type thing. It started to get ugly pretty quickly. Staley had to answer questions now every week. Why aren't you even making your highest paid corner active on game days? He can't even be a depth piece at this point. And Staley kept being very vague and being like, we have the best group of players for right now, or whatever he kept saying, whatever, stuff he was spewing, which didn't really mean anything, no real details, but it kept getting uglier and uglier. And so Brandon Staley just kept saying that it wasn't a good fit. And so they let him go and let him get traded to the Patriots. The Chargers get a pick in return. And now they've kind of just washed their hands of the situation and they've moved forward. So how much of it, going back to this question now, knowing that, Staley couldn't really didn't feel like JC was a good fit. It felt like his personality rubbed him the wrong way. And JC feeling like he got burned because he didn't get a true shake at being a starter for the Chargers. How much of fault do you give this to the coaching staff, or how much of a fault do you give this to JC Jackson, in your personal opinion?
So when you look at this in totality, I think that there are equal parts fault to go around. I mean, if you want to call it 50-50, then so be it. But let's just start from the very beginning. The ankle injury is the thing that rings the most into my head because the timing of when the surgery happens throws me off. You get into camp, you're performing well. I think they were having joint practices with the Cowboys, and apparently he was locking the guys up, and Staley was raving about it. And about 2 weeks before the season kicks off, there comes this news about the ankle situation. He has to have surgery. It just felt like it was something that the team wasn't made aware of, which is also kind of weird because, I mean, they have to go through physicals and things of that nature. So it's kind of strange, number one, that it didn't pop up there. But also that if this is an issue that you've dealt with, it's something that you've had, and apparently this is something he's dealt with for years. It just hasn't been a big enough deal for him to have a procedure about it, which again blows my mind because you played very well with it. So it didn't matter for years. And so it flares up, and now you feel like you need to have it taken care of just before the season starts.
Do you attribute his success to the extra bone in his foot? Do you think that's what it? That's it.
Gotta be it.
That's gotta be it. Okay, go ahead.
So just that whole scenario rubs me the wrong way. I'm not sure why that happened when it was. It seems like it's an on him thing because Staley comes out and says that he wanted to have the surgery as if it was his choice, and they were essentially just backing him. Like, this is something he wants to do. It's not like a very invasive procedure, just has to get it cleaned up. He'll be fine. Well, then he comes back and he performs not great. I think it was the KC game. I was actually at that game. He gave up a big play there, but apparently that wasn't his fault. He was supposed to have help over the top, I believe. However it went. He just didn't look like the old JC at that point. But you have to remember, regardless as to how minor the surgery was, it was still a surgery. So you're still healing from it. And then there's the mental aspect of that. So I'm going to put a lot of that on him for waiting as long as he did to say something about it and electing to have the procedure. I'll put that on him. Now, you can't fault him for a freak accident and an injury where he blows out his patella on a routine play that he's probably made hundreds of times in his life. So that happens. And then he goes into the offseason, like you mentioned, works out like a madman, comes back from an injury that a lot of guys never really recover from. And those that do don't come back the same player. And in a sport like football, this injury almost seems like a death sentence. But we saw what he did. He made it back. And not only did he make it back, he made it back for the first game of the season, which is another bit of a red flag for me because I expected him to be on a pitch count. I did not foresee him coming into that game and playing snaps as if nothing had ever taken place, because keep in mind, he was only really pulled later in the game after he had kind of already screwed the pooch. So the flip side to this is having him go out there, not doing what was in his best interest, because even though he claimed he was 100%, he clearly wasn't. And you stick him on the,
fastest man,
the anchor leg of an Olympic 4x1 team in Tyreek Hill. And you were surprised that he got his boots cooked, which happens to healthy players. So, I mean, what was the real expectation there? Him one-on-one with no safety help over the top probably wasn't the smartest thing. So he has a horrible game there, and then he makes two boneheaded plays, which have nothing to do with athleticism or lack thereof. That was all mental. I totally understand that, especially when, you lose the game by what? Was it 2-3 points? What was it again? Yeah. So with that being said, yeah, he earned some criticism there, but also the team has to take some fault for the way that they kind of rolled him out there and expected him to be the guy he used to be against probably the worst possible team that you could ask him to do it against. So yeah, again, like I said, equal parts, but then you know that the Chargers typically like to keep, especially things like, what came out pretty much in-house. But when it got to the point of being public, you knew kind of sort of the direction this might be going in. When you got the player and the head coach apparently not on the same page, the player speaks out about it. Nothing good ever really comes from that. And if they don't get that buttoned up in a hurry, then probably going to go a different direction, in a way that not either party really, really wants. And then in the Tennessee Titans game, he didn't give up any big plays. That was Asante Samuel Jr. and Mike Davis. And then he gets benched the following game, like not benched, inactive altogether against Minnesota, which to me, I couldn't figure out. And then you got the personal issue stuff that came off the field, which is again on him. So it's almost like ping pong. Everybody's doing stupid stuff. So no one is absolved. It just got to the point where I feel like it was irreconcilable. He had his issues with not playing, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more in detail as to what his complaints were. And ultimately, you can't just point the finger at one or the other. I mean, they made a huge investment in JC. It was probably in the team's best interest to allow him to come along more slowly. The fact that they ran him out there the way that they did for the amount of plays consistently that they did, I don't think was wise. But also, this all started off with JC not necessarily being the most honest and forthcoming about his body. So you can take that as a guy wanting to get on the field. Great. I understand that. But by the same token, if you're going to push yourself beyond where you're capable of based on how your body is after an injury, that's your personal decision to make. But you also can't be an albatross in the locker room saying things, coming out publicly when you don't necessarily agree with your usage. It's on all fronts, there's responsibility and culpability. So ultimately, I don't think one is worse than the other. Again, like I said, it's pretty much equal parts. So take that for what it's worth. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I don't know that there's one more than the other. I think it's concerning that just the way in which they treated JC Jackson. I mean, it feels like if he wasn't a good fit, and you had kind of issues with his personality, like it felt like after a surgery in his foot, he worked to get back, and then he worked back to get back from this injury faster than most players that I can remember. I don't have a timeline for every player that's came back, but the fact that he was able to come back and wanted to play week one seems like a pretty good indicator that he's a pretty good team player, wanting to get back on the field. And then to throw him out there week one and then just say, hey man, figure it out. Just felt like they were pushing him too fast. And I think we all expected him to be on a pitch count like you talked about. And the fact that they didn't put him on a pitch count was surprising. The fact that they didn't put safety help over the top was a little surprising. And the fact that they didn't make and couldn't find a way for him to fit when he's mostly a man-only corner just feels like an easy thing to do. And it feels like a coordinator or coach who's a little too hard-headed in his own ways to not make a piece like JC Jackson fit into their system. So, I mean, I feel like I feel more on JC Jackson's side, but not so much that it's so close to even to me because JC's wrong in a lot of ways. You'd love for him to be a team player. I get he came back in his own way from these injuries and stuff, but also it felt like he kind of started to use the media as a mouthpiece because he couldn't get through to Staley. And you like for him to keep that in-house, but also if your coach is just saying, nah, man, you ain't playing this week when you're a starting corner who's led the league in interceptions, multiple Pro Bowls, and been the best at his position for a number of years, to just be told, hey, man, not this week, feels like I'd be pretty upset too, especially after a bad game against Miami feels at this point like something that's happened to everybody. And then to bench him halfway through the second game, in which I don't remember seeing him making any big mistakes in that game, but benching him and then putting Jasir Taylor out there was questionable. And then just saying, hey man, if anybody gets injured, we'll figure it out with Dean Leonard or something. I don't know. Feels even worse. I don't know. It just feels like, they really had a quick hook on him, and I just don't understand why. And well, I mean, it feels like the reason is they didn't mesh. They didn't like his personality, and they just weren't willing to give him a shot. When I feel like they've given some pretty bad players a longer leash, even like Jerry Tillery, longer with a guy who's had a bad attitude and is on record to having a really bad attitude, gave him a longer leash than they did a guy like JC Jackson, who's so much more supremely talented than a guy like Jerry Tillery. So, I feel like when you ask like who's more at fault in this experiment, I feel like I personally am siding with JC Jackson a little bit more, just because it just feels like, the optics of this and the way in which they just wash their hands of it so quickly feels more an issue with the Chargers than it does JC Jackson. But obviously he's not perfect either. So, if we're splitting hairs here, I'm kind of leaning more towards JC Jackson, but it's so close to the middle right now. It just feels like they both kind of mess this whole relationship up.
Yeah. I mean, with the, additional information that comes out, of course, you can always adjust your opinion because when you find out new truths, you can make those adjustments, and you should.
Yeah.
I will say that I went back and forth with it until like I had pretty much everything in totality to what's come out to this point, should I say. And then I'm like, okay, well, I see what both of you guys are wrong. Like, I'm not necessarily saying I could take a side one way or another initially, but I did feel like they didn't do JC any service by the way that they rolled him out this year, coming off of the type of injury that they did. I felt like that they misplayed their hand for certain there. And again, you go back to JC not really reporting that initial ankle injury. And even though those two injuries aren't necessarily related, you can see where you don't have very much margin for error after the larger injury occurs. So then he actually never plays one fully healthy down of regular season football for the Chargers. So it's hard to tell whether or not, he didn't just show up to LA and forget how to play football. But this goes back to my whole, square peg round hole theory when it comes to football players. If you're going to go after a guy and his specialty is one thing, you don't sign him to come in. And this is where it's really weird. When you see that All In episode where, after Jason got signed and Staley's sitting there with his notes with him, reading out his strengths, and he literally tells him about his man coverage ability, never mentions anything about zone, by the way. I'm not saying he has to break it all down to him, but if you're going to sit there and talk to this guy so he can be impressed with how much you've studied him, and one of the things you call out to him is the thing that he's known the most for, and then, based on the information that we've received, ask him to do the opposite more so than what he's comfortable in doing it, and think that he may not feel comfortable doing it. Number one, because it's not something he was accustomed to doing before. It's not what he's known for. But also, he's trying to do this while mentally overcoming a severe injury, recovering fully from that. It could be a lot. So I could see both sides of the coin, but it almost feels like JC thinks potentially he was deceived into what his role would be when he came in. Because I can't imagine, well, I don't know, if they're going to sign you 60 mil, then maybe you'll just accept it because you want the bread, maybe. But he was actually offered more money elsewhere. But I think there was a relationship there with Derwin James as well. So he might have taken less to come on board with the Chargers. But I digress. That's more detail. If you know who I am, I'm Mr. INT. I'm known for following the best receivers on every other every other squad's team, and I do my best to lock them up, and that's what I'm known for. Then let me do that. Don't have me come in and ask me to be someone that I've proven that I've not really been. Because even if you go back and watch the New England film of him, because they asked him to play more zone that last year in New England before he became a free agent, and that didn't go over so well. The dude looked lost in coverage in zone. So it's not like you had, this large sample size of film to refer to say, oh yeah, he'll be great doing this. He'd be awesome in cover 6 or 4 or 2. Let's ask him to do more of that. Even though there's film showing you that's probably not the best way to utilize him. And it does come down to maybe Staley overthinking things, feeling like his scheme just needs an athlete of certain caliber in order to work. And it doesn't matter what the guy's overall skill set is, whether or not it fit him. I just need a guy with a name that's performed, and I can fit him in here, and then all will go well. Well, we have a bunch of names on this defense, and it hasn't looked the way that he's imagined it from the very beginning. So the question becomes, are you just being stubborn about your scheme? Is it the players, all of them, just aren't figuring it out? or are you going to continue to bump your head against the wall and try to make something work that clearly isn't going to work the way you initially envisioned it? And maybe you should just make some adjustments so that the team performs to the guys' actual skill sets, and you allow them to be in a position to play better to the best of their ability based on what they do best. And that's a Staley thing.
I hate being cryptic, so let's just put it all out there because it just feels weird to be speaking in code here. So here's what else we got, and you can join the Discord and you'll get this stuff as it comes out. So the additional context we got, or I got, was that basically J.C. Jackson's attitude really turned off both Brandon Staley and Derek Ansley, the defensive coordinator. They felt like J.C. was mentally checked out. And that's in quotes. They think that it was partly because, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, that JC didn't really think that Staley knew how to use him. And a direct quote from my guy was, JC and coach would fight over coverages. JC kept telling him, let me play a man, quote. Coach is zone heavy. They fought over it a few times. JC wanted to roam on his own like in New England. Belichick left JC alone and built a secondary around it. That's not how we do it. So Staley and Ansley felt like JC didn't really respect them and his opinions. And they didn't really want a guy that they couldn't trust to be on the field for an extended period of time. If a guy doesn't respect your opinion, how are you going to put him on the field to be a starter? And so in JC Jackson's mind, he goes to a system now where he can thrive in. And it was just JC's personality that really turned the Chargers off. And so the deal gets done, and it was part of a big reason why this thing soured pretty quickly.
Well, there you go. So now I don't have to talk around it anymore. Now you guys know what information I'm referencing.
Yeah, let's not be cryptic. Let's just put it out there. Yeah,
pretty much see for yourselves now. This is a scenario where he felt like he wasn't being utilized to the best of his abilities. He wasn't doing what he became successful in the NFL at doing. And they weren't giving him a fair shot at that. But you also can't be a turncoat against your own team. I mean, I'm not saying that, well, I guess at that point he did when he decided he wasn't being used properly, that he wasn't going to buy in any longer and try to become any better at what they were asking him to do. Maybe he's just tuning them out at that point. And I knew that it couldn't have all been performance-based because, like we mentioned, he didn't play terribly in that Titans game. And all of a sudden, he was inactive. Of course, there was the off-the-field stuff. But then when you go out and publicly speak out against, what's going on and the fact that you're not playing and your level of confusion, I kind of felt like that was one of those, okay, we're going to slap you on the wrist and you're not going to play next week either. You might suit up, but that doesn't mean because you came out and complained that we're going to put you on the field. It doesn't change anything. We need to make you active. Number one, because the guy that we probably play in front of you is hurt and we need the depth. So go ahead and suit up, but you're not going to break a sweat other than in warm-ups. So have at it.
Yeah. And so that's what I was kind of referring to earlier. If he was mentally checked out, you would like for him to be more of a team guy. And if he doesn't like the way in which he's being utilized, figure out a way to marry the two between what Staley and Ansley wanted and what he wanted. Not just, hey man, just put me in man, which from JC Jackson's perspective is what got him the payday that he got from the Chargers. So let me do what you pay me to do. And, and then you could build a system around him, but Staley's got his system. That's not how he works. And we all know he's very zone heavy. And so, they weren't just going to let him man up one side and put him on an island. And that was pretty clear once he got here. But
even though you talked it up to him when you
read those highlights,
you read out his notes, you basically said all those things to him. I could see why that may give you the impression that you may be doing more of that than not. But signal crossed.
And then JC said through the media, like, hey, listen, I'm out here, I'm practicing, I'm in the meetings, I'm there after the meetings, but also like if your attitude's bad and you're just kind of floating through these meetings, I mean, you're just, you're a ghost and nobody really believes that you're there to win or help the team. You're just there because you have to, or because you don't want to get fined,
So can't have that in the locker room either. So he wrote himself a first-class ticket out of there.
Yeah. So that is your context. It got pretty sour pretty quickly. It paints a picture of Staley being pretty hard-headed about his system. And while I understand that part of it too, because let's be honest, he got a job because of that system and his defense. That's why they hired him and his success with the Rams. But also, let's look at the success he's had as a Charger. As a coach, his defense has been bottom 5 every year. So at some point you got to make some kind of adjustments. And so you could get why maybe it would be in your best benefit to let JC do his thing. But also, if he's got a bad attitude, doesn't matter how good you are on the field. If you're a cancer in the locker room, it's hard to really, not that I'm saying he's a cancer, but he obviously, there were some kind of personality issues, and he had the off the field stuff. I mean, it all just kind of all came to a head, and Chargers were not happy to rid him, but we're glad to kind of get this over with early in the year than to wait all the way till the trade deadline. So,
well, just the last thing, he kind of, this feels weird to say, shoots himself in the foot with the whole foot.
Yeah.
But anyway,
go for it.
That's a poor precedent to allow him to do that and not discipline him for it fully, or potentially think about getting him out of there. It sets the wrong tone for the rest of the locker room, because if guys see that and they're not acting this way and he's allowed to, and then continue on, then what does that say to the rest of your players? And I mean, I applaud them for moving on this as quickly as they did, because that's not technically or typically the Charger way. They will always keep a guy a day later than they should. And for what it is, it didn't work out and they shipped him out. So again, I commend them for it. It just, you end up with a little bit of egg on your face from the way that this scenario played out, but at least you cut it off at the head before it could essentially maybe affect the rest of your team. I hope it doesn't. So
yeah. And it I feel bad about it because, Derwin did the whole recruitment, got him here. We had the eye emojis blazing Twitter, and man, that was so exciting. That was a great day. And then now his boy's gone, but I guess that's just the nature of the business. So let's move on, and let's move on to some of these other questions, because we got a bunch here and we got some bad tweets to get to too. So here we go, Craig, moving on.
Yeah. Okay. So this one is from QJS. Why does the defense seemingly play better when Derwin is out? Well, QJ, that is a very interesting question. And what I will say is that it appears that they pare things down a bit for the replacement guys, particularly in this last week, when you had practice squad players that both had to step up because, Lohi Gilman and JT Woods were out, and you can't ask as much of them. But what this should show you, because these guys were able to keep the top on the defense, you didn't see any really big plays given up. That should concern you a bit, because why can guys just step in off of the practice squad and execute the defense better on the back end than the starters do? And it probably means that they're asking the starters to do too much. And it could also have something to do with the way that they maneuver Derwin, who is probably better served playing in the box and not necessarily as much in the deep third. He can get away with it. He can play it to a degree, but it's not his strength. And notice how players playing in positions that aren't their strength keeps coming up. It's kind of a trend. Just saying. So I think it's just because they're not asked to do as much without Derwin out and other guys, of course. So I'm going to lean on that. Maybe Staley's just trying to be too cute in the scheme, and it's affecting the defensive performance overall. They just need to pare things down and let guys play fast and free. And that's pretty much all we've been asking now for at least a year and a half.
Yeah. We've answered this question before, but just simply, so Derwin, and Craig mentioned a lot of it, but Derwin is asked to do a lot, and that's what makes Derwin. He'll play both safety spots. He'll play some star, some corner. You'll have him rush off the edge. But that complicates things for the defense, and it changes responsibility for everybody else. If Derwin's rushing, then who's taking over his safety spot? Who's taking over the star spot? Who's got the back end? Where is everybody lined up? And so everybody has different responsibilities because Derwin has so many different positions, because he's that positionless player. With Derwin out, everybody plays straight up, which simplifies everything for everyone else. And we saw it last week. Nobody's got to worry about where anybody else is. They just got to play their own position. I mean, they got keys and everything else they got to read, but in terms of knowing where their own responsibilities are, it's not as complicated because Derwin isn't being moved around as the chess piece. When Derwin's out, everybody's just got their one guaranteed position and then have to know what they have to do from their spot. So that's why it seems they play a little bit better, because everybody is pretty much on the same page and they aren't asked to do a bunch of different things.
Yep. I mean, yeah, it's like buying a Lamborghini and then taking it out every day and doing donuts every opportunity you can. It's probably not the best thing for your car just because it looks cool and it can do it. So it's not the most efficient thing overall.
Okay. All right. I was seeing where you're going with that because I had no idea where you're going. All right.
All right.
All right. Last one here on Discord. Password is mad again.
Okay. I don't know why this is showing up so small for me.
Oh, you want me to blow it up? No, hold on.
No, you're good. It's my screen.
Okay.
My computer's moving slow for some reason.
Here, I'll read it for you.
Here we go. I got you.
Okay.
There it is. I'm seeing the Chargers versus Jets on Monday Night Football. What are the chances I'm going home heartbroken? Go for it, Garrett.
I hope low. I mean, Zach Wilson is one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league right now. We see it every week. Everybody talks about them getting another quarterback and filling in for somebody since Aaron Rodgers got hurt. I mean, I know the Jets defense is good, but they just haven't been able to be good enough to cover up Zach Wilson's mistakes. To me, it feels a lot like the Raiders game in that it's a pretty bad quarterback, a young one, and this offensive line is actually worse than the Raiders offensive line is. So they got a better defense, the Jets do, but I say hopefully you won't be heartbroken, and if you are, stay strong, Matt, because I don't know what to tell you if they lose to the Jets.
I feel like this is a bit of a rhetorical question.
You're going to be heartbroken no matter what because you're a Charger fan?
I mean, if you've been a Charger fan for long enough, you know the answer to this question. The probability is pretty high, honestly. I personally have learned to go in with a level head. The issue is that this is what the Chargers do. You can get into a game, much like the one that happened last week, where things look like they're going great, and so your expectations get heightened, and then they just start gut punching you. It's the most disgusting roller coaster ride you can ever go on. So my advice is go in, even kill, and don't do what I did because it might ruin other people's time. Like my wife on Sunday when we were up 24/7 going in the half, she's sitting next to me at the game. She's like, "Oh, it's all good. You guys got this. It's cool.
This is the Raider
game. Happy, right?"
Yeah.
I looked at her and I'm like, "You've been married to me for over a decade. You see what I go through with this team. You can't say that." And then comes the third and fourth quarter. She looks at me. "I'm sorry. Yeah, don't worry about it." But ultimately, they came out with the W. So hopefully, I'm hoping for you and your heart, and everything works out. But just go in level-headed about it. That would be my recommendation.
I had the same type of experience during the playoff game where I'm watching it in my living room. My wife walks in and goes, "Oh, this is good." And then we'll walk in again. And it's like, "Oh, wow, this is looking really good." And I'm like, "Stop it." And then she'll walk in again and be like, "Oh my gosh, they're going to win it already." I'm like, "Hey, listen, you can't say things like that. You know that." We know they'll never learn, but we know. All right. Let's move on to these bad tweets. And then we'll get out of here. I got 3 of them here. This one is our first one, Craig. And of course, we take the names out of it. Jerry Tillery hitting Justin Herbert late as a former teammate shows that Justin is not a leader and is not respected in the locker room.
Wait. Time out. I know somebody on bath salts when I see him. This is not a normal tweet. You are not in your right mind. What's the correlation between these two things? What does Jerry Tillery, who plays for the Raiders, have to do with the way that Justin Herbert's locker room views him? Are you forgetting that Jerry Tillery plays for the Raiders now and no longer the Chargers?
Yeah.
Like, what's the connection here? It just feels like either number one, because I always have to go here first, this is a troll, or secondly, you just don't know what the hell you're talking about, and God bless you, because I have no advice for you. We've seen some pretty terrible tweets. This has got to be, at this point, top 3. You're gunning for it. You're gunning for the top spot. Number one, we know what number 1 is, but you're gunning for the top spot with this one. So
this is really, really bad. And I always try to check to see if it's some kind of sarcasm or maybe they're trolling. But this person is a Raider, I believe is a Raider fan, and was there was another tweet about him kind of defending like that late hit on Herbert wasn't actually all that late. It was too close to call, but so it's just a person with a bad opinion. But
okay. So you said they're a Raider fan, so that explains they're remedial. It makes perfect sense now.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. And then we're like not even considering that Tillery was cut because he was a head case, and that's on record, and how that hit has nothing to do with Herbert and more to do with Tillery. But we're shifting the focus on the known culprit of Jerry Tillery, who is a known head case, and shifting it to one of the most unassuming people maybe on the planet, let alone the NFL, to Justin Herbert not being a good leader. All right, man. You do you, I guess. All right. Next one, number 2. This is also about Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert doesn't win. He chokes. He's a stat patter, just like Kirk Cousins, and wait for it, Carson Wentz. Now we've talked about the choking thing and about how, he's got like 9 fourth quarter comeback wins, and that's like, one of the top in the NFL, and it's better than guys like Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow and Tua and Jalen Hurts and all that stuff. So
facts don't matter, Garrett.
That doesn't matter. Stat patter is crazy, but what I can't get past is this last part. How are you even in the same like breath of Justin Herbert and Carson Wentz? Like, we've seen that Kirk Cousins BS. I mean, that just seems like an easy correlation that stupid people make. But Carson Wentz, who maybe had that one good season with the Eagles. I mean, he's not even in the NFL now.
Let me pose a question to you, Garrett.
Is this rhetorical? Because this feels like it's going to be rhetorical.
No. Okay, no, seriously. I think this needs to be asked. Just so, because in my head it's going a certain way, but I'm always in my head, so maybe it could just be me. When are you capable of padding stats? What has to happen in order for that to be an option?
See, that's what I could do. I was thinking the same exact thing, and that's why I just kind of like skipped over that part, because this isn't basketball where you're like, getting extra rebounds and, putting up baskets just so you can get your triple double and stuff. There is no such thing as stat padding in the NFL.
Okay, so let's look at it this way. Let me shoot this guy some bail. Let's assume you're saying that he just puts up yardage when it doesn't matter. That doesn't make sense, because in order for that to happen, the Chargers neither have a large lead or be getting the crap kicked out of them. But all they do is play close games.
Yeah, neither.
So what are we doing, man? This entire statement is asinine. Stop it.
But how are you going to add Carson Wentz? I mean, come on, man.
I didn't even pay attention to the Wentz thing. It felt like he dug in a hat and picked out a name.
Yeah.
Cool. This will work. Let's type it.
Mm-hmm.
Send. Nah. There's no logic behind that.
All right. And then the next one here, it's a video. So let me all right, let me see if I'm going to stop this one. I'm going to pull this up and see if we could and this feels like a freezing cold take, like one of those.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just share. Let me see if we can hear this audio. Tell me if you can hear. Let me go to the beginning. Tell me if you can hear this.
Oh God, another Raiders fan.
Did you hear that?
No.
Oh man. All right, hold on. Let's see if we can get out of this real quick. All right, I'm going to pull it back up for a second. Hold on. Give me 1 minute. Man, I wish I should have downloaded that video. That would have been much easier. This is a good one too, so I don't want to lose it, but also If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
I think we're gonna have to start ranking these.
Oh, you think so?
I think we should make a list and.
Okay, I'm gonna download this video just to make this so much easier. Give me some of your favorite, well, your least favorites.
Where as far as the bad
tweets, yeah.
Well, I mean, we've had a few, but for some reason, the really bad ones all seem to be about Herbert. But the number one has to be about him faking progressions. That's the one that stands out over all of these. Like today's were ridiculous, but that particular one will never leave my mind because it's such a ridiculous comment to make because it's not a real thing. Based on just some of his accolades. You don't produce the way that he has by pretending to read defenses and going to just like your number one read all the time. It's not really how football works, but you know, that one takes the cake for me. It's still number one.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me if you can hear this. I'm gonna start real quick.
The Raiders just signed Star.
Did you hear that? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, I want to see where this ranks. Because when I saw this, now this is old. This is when the Raiders signed Tillery, but it's starting to make its rounds on Twitter. It's all back. I'd like to do a wellness check on him since then, but let's go ahead and listen to how this goes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The Raiders just signed star defensive tackle Jeffrey Tillery. Welcome to the Silver and Black. Let's go. He's a former first-round pick. You know what they say. Everyone plays better when they leave the Chargers, and that's a fact, bro. So you don't have to worry about blowing any more leads because you're in the dark side now, buddy. Let's get
it. So let me start off because I don't know if you caught the first part. Did you hear the name he called him? Let's start over again, okay? Listen.
Star defensive tackle Jeffrey Tillery. Welcome.
Jeffrey Tillery. So so he must be mistaken on which. First of all, didn't even get the name right. But also, it's facts that every Charger that ever plays anywhere else is always better. Star defensive tackle. That's how we start this thing off. Boy, man, he teed that thing up and then goes Jeffrey Tillery. How do you think this man today is feeling? Because this man, I mean, he's so hyped here to get Jeffrey Tillery.
Trying to be respectful here.
Why?
You know what? Screw it. I know cocaine when I see it.
You had a bump. Cocaine.
You had a bump. Yeah, no, there's drugs all around the place. I know you took a bump before you did this, man.
It's a crime
First of all,
scene.
You're way too excited. You're way too excited about this. And there's no possible way you watched Jeffrey or Jerry play football before they came to the Raiders. It's not possible. You cannot watch him physically play football and deduce that when he becomes a Raider that suddenly he's going to perform as a first-round draft pick, or you would expect him to. My man, what Chargers are you aware of that played for the team left and either got better, stayed the same? Like, I mean, Adrian Phillips comes to mind. Yeah, you know.
But did he get better?
But I mean, he played, I would say, to the same level at least. When
Yeah.
But you could rattle off a crap ton of names of guys who just couldn't even stick in the next places they went. Some of those dudes don't even play football anymore, and it didn't take a really long period of time before they were out of the league. So this is what happens when you get really overly excited about something and you don't think anyone's going to call you on your BS. So you think you just hop in front of a camera and say anything you want, and there will be no repercussions for it. And this is why you can always review these things before you hit send. You don't have to do it live. If you're not certain, well, I don't know. It could be the coke that's doing it. I don't know. I know a few cokeheads, they act a little bit like this.
Yeah.
So with that being said, someone should check on him. He's clearly doing too much of it, whatever it is he's doing. But God bless you, man.
I'm sure he's got like 12 TikTok followers, and this is the most run he's got. But this just feels insane. And I'm trying to think of some kind of Chargers that get better after they leave the Chargers. And I mean, I know like Sayao and Rodney Harrison got rings and stuff, but I don't know that they got better per se. Definitely not Sayao. Like, I just can't think of any
You know,
player.
you're thinking too far back. I guarantee
Yeah.
you that dude doesn't even know that they play for the Chargers at any given point. He's
Yeah, of
probably
course.
looking at like the last 5 to 8 years. He might know Sean Merriman, maybe.
Yeah, but he didn't get better, you know, when he went Wes Welker. Okay. That's a good call. But also he was like practice squad guy, so that didn't really count. And also like in the middle here, he goes, no more blowing leads anymore. This was recorded a year ago. I mean, the Raiders have been terrible for a long time. So I don't know what he's talking about.
It's booger sugar.
Welcome to the silver and black. Let's go. He's a former first-round pick. You know what they say. Everyone plays better when they leave the.
Who says though? Who's they?
There's the generalities, man. I love it. People think they can get away with that crap. They can just make a blanket statement, and it's supposed to be all good. They just blurt some nonsense out.
Not only do they say it,
I don't know. I don't know anyone who knows that.
No, the only thing you ever hear, across the league, in my mind, is you do not sign any Patriots free agents because they don't get any better going anywhere else. That's always been, whether it's a coaching staff member, and I know this is pretty sour because of JC Jackson at the moment, but it's like I don't know any what they, not just they say, they say this, but nobody says it.
Chargers, and that's a fact, bro. So you don't have to.
And that's a fact.
Worry about.
Now he's lying. When you say they say that's facts.
Yeah.
You're lying.
Nobody cares about facts, man. It's just whatever sounds good. Just say it.
That's when you know they're lying. When you have to overcompensate for the lie that you're telling, because it's like
the
if it was a thing,
generalities, man. That's how they do it. That's a thing, and they love doing. Well, I mean, I don't have a TikTok, but on Twitter, that's the thing to do. Just make a blanket statement and hedge a bet. Either make a blanket statement or hedge, and you can't go wrong. You know, because you can always claim something to the contrary later because you didn't actually call out a specific. So, yeah, it's the thing.
Yeah, and then the end is
blowing any more leads because you're in the dark side now, buddy. Let's get it.
You're not blowing any more leads because you're in the dark side, and all they've done since then is blow leads.
Star defensive tackle, man.
Jeffrey Tillery. Drew Brees might be a good one. This could count.
Good call, Todd.
Yeah. I think that you could get with this one. And is he wearing a Jerry Rice jersey, by the way?
I couldn't make the numbers out.
Here's your son, star defensive tackle Jeffrey Tillery. Welcome to the silver and black. Let's go. He's a
right. This is a Jerry Rice jersey. Raiders jersey. Anyway, speaking of not getting better, going
to decrepit Raider Jerry Rice. That's a reach, man. You can't do that. You can't wear a Jerry Rice Raiders jersey. Get a Bo Jackson or something. Come on, dude.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. Don't do that. Don't do that.
I'm gonna go cop a Seattle Jerry Rice jersey for the hell of it. Why not?
Why not? Well, all right, cool. Well, that does it for us. I think we're good. I think this is a good little ending here. So thanks, guys, for joining us. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you're subscribed over on Twitter, wherever. Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, OnlyFans, wherever we're at. Jeffrey, yes, it was, sorry, not Jerry Rice, Jeffrey Rice jersey.
Okay.
Job,
I bet you're right. That jersey came from the gas station. It's absolutely Jeffrey Rice.
It's Terry Rice. All right, cool. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you're subscribed everywhere. Thanks for jumping on. We'll be here every Thursday for this live roundtable, and we will see you next time.
Salute.
Oh, we didn't get the James.